My name is Sue Williams, and I make white oak baskets. I have been making white oak baskets for almost 40 years. I enjoy making baskets because it's like therapy. I can forget about everything else and start looking at what I can accomplish. My first class was in 1985. Gertie Youngblood and Gertie Youngblood were the teachers. Hopefully, it will pass on to another generation. Right now, I am the only teacher in Middle Tennessee that teaches white oak baskets. I want this tradition to go on to the next generation because it's going to be a dead art if it's not. And other areas do not teach the Cannon County style white oak basket. Cannon County has a rich history of white oak baskets. During the Depression and some before, the people lived on hills. They could not produce that many crops. So most of the men made chairs, but a lot of them also made white oak baskets, and a lot of women made white oak baskets. And they are so many that were renowned for making their baskets. Several have baskets in the Smithsonian. When they made baskets years ago, most of them, a broker came by and bought their baskets, or they had traded them at a local grocery store, and the brokers would buy from the grocery stores and take the baskets north to sell them. After this happened, people everywhere knew about Cannon County and their baskets. Cannon County is known as the basket capital. I'm not sure the other counties have really a special name, but Cannon County is the white oak basket capital. Also in Cannon County, for years, they've had the White Oak Craft Fair. So baskets, even today, still support some of the families. Most people really treasure a Cannon County basket, and you know when you've got a Cannon County basket when it has that special tie that's Cannon County. It's an X with a loop over it. Every one of them is not the same, but you always know it's a Cannon County basket when you see this. Originally, baskets were functional. They made egg baskets, garden baskets. They were put together much faster than it are today. They made baskets that they could use, and also baskets that other families could use. This is an egg basket, but it's a refined egg basket. Years ago, they were the same style, but they were wide weavers. They did not spend that much time scraping. And the egg basket is a bulge, and you could put your eggs, some on each side while you were gathering your eggs, and they did not roll. And then as you built up, you never broke an egg because each group you put in, you switched sides all the time and built it up. So it was very important that everybody had an egg basket that was functional, and it was one of the more important baskets that was made in Cannon County. They also made a garden basket. Of course, the garden basket is just like the egg basket. It still has the Cannon County tie, but they could go to the garden, put their arm through, and collect what vegetables they had in the garden they needed to bring in. At that time, they did not have plastic buckets, metal buckets. They had to make and use what they had made. So this was a garden basket. When I got this basket, after it had been used many, many years, all the weavers were shredding and falling through. Well, I restored this basket, glued what I could, used every piece I could, and then wove the basket again. This is the Cannon County tie. It has the loop going all the way around on both sides, and then comes up and loops around the middle. And all of them is an X with a loop to hold the handle and the rim together. And anytime you see a basket, you know it's a Cannon County basket if the tie looks like this. To make a Miss Gertie basket, the first thing we need to do is go to the woods and cut a pole. We have to make sure it's a white oak tree, diameter maybe 6 to 8 inches, and you only use the trunk of the tree. Whenever there's limbs, knots, the material will not work well, so you look for the perfect tree and you cut it in the fall. It is very important because Miss Gertie said when the sap is going down, it's the time to cut it, and you work all the materials up as soon as you can when the tree's cut. She also told me that any part of the tree that you couldn't work right then, to cover it in leaves, put something on the end to make sure the moisture stayed in the tree trunk until you had time to work it up. I have cut a tree, and it might be a couple of days before I could start breaking it down. So I made sure the ends was covered with leaves to hold that moisture in the tree. After the tree trunk is cut, you start breaking it down. You break it in half, then you make fourths, and some of them you make eighths, and then you start separating the heartwood out. And after the heartwood comes out, you probably can split down that eighth again to make weavers. And you pull the weavers by the growth rings. Okay, we have talked about breaking down the tree before, fourths, halves, fourths, then eighths. And then sometimes that eighth, we're going to do it one more time. We'll take the heartwood out, and you're still going to have to level each side because it's pie-shaped when you first have it. So when you have it to where it's very consistent, then you're going to look at your growth rings. I take a knife, set it on the growth ring, take the mallet, and hit right on top on the knife, and it will separate this. And here's one that has been separated. So after I do that, then I separate, like my half over here, I do half again by growth ring. And the growth ring is the little white that you see going across. Okay, when I'm doing this side, I do the same thing, but the piece of wood closest to the bark, I say for the tie, because it doesn't have all the marks, the growth places in it. It's more clear, and when you put the tie on, it doesn't crack because it doesn't have grain in it After this is done, you can store the weavers after they've been pulled, and you can store the ribs and the handles. But if you do not do all of it immediately when you cut the tree, it is almost impossible to work with. You can soak it in rainwater in a barrel and it helps, but it never works as well as it does when you first pull it out of the tree. After all the materials is done, which you're talking about, a week or more just to get them to where you can store them, or you can go ahead and start making a basket. I normally store mine, and then in the wintertime I'll start some baskets. I also have to do a lot of preparation for classes I teach, and I've been teaching classes for over 20 years. These are ribs, and they have been whittled, smoothed, and points made on them. This is a weaver, but it's been refined. The weaver now is very flexible. We soak it in rainwater to make sure that it doesn't break. Anytime, when you first get the weavers, they're about a 1/2 inch wide, and then you use scissors and cut them down to this size if you're going to try to make a basket with the smaller weavers. If you were making a huge basket, you could use wider weavers, but Miss Gertie used narrow weavers, and that's the kind of weavers I like to use. So we have the handle and the rim. We have it put together with a Cannon County tie. Then we started inserting the ribs into that tie, and then we start weaving after we made very narrow weavers. The way we get these weavers is that we use a shaving horse and a draw knife. I have it flexible enough that I can use my knife on it easily now. For in the next step in making a weaver, I fine scrape again with a knife to get it very, very flexible. I hold my thumb down on my knife. I actually pull the wood. So my knife stays still. And it's much easier after you've already got the rough off with the shaving horse and the draw knife. Didn't go all the way thin. Okay. So now I have that thin enough, I'm ready to trim down one side, use my scissors, and cut it the width that I want. And you do several weavers at one time, get them all scraped, ready to cut, and then you start cutting. So the next step is to cut your weaver. And I use the side of my scissors as a gauge, so when I put it on there, I look to see if I've got the same distance. So you continue cutting your weavers and stay as close to the same width all the time. And when you have your weaver completely cut as many as you can get out of this one piece. And after you've cut the weavers, Sometimes you still have to go back and adjust a little bit on width if you see a little wider place. But this is how we make our weavers. And I use the same type scissors all the time. And I try to cut using that blade to where I can get my width as consistent as possible. So when you get to the end, what I normally do is to make sure that this weaver doesn't get dried out too much before I do the next step. And what I do is put the weaver around my fingers, and then I'll drop this in a container, and all it has to have is water, and you're ready to weave with it. With ribs, you just get to use a knife. You cannot really work with the shaving horse and the draw knife on ribs. You can on handles and rims to get them shaped exactly the way, smoothed off. And when you get them smooth the way you want them, there is a lap on the bottom, so you thin the bottom to where your lap doesn't make a big bulge on one side. So after you thin it, they used to nail them. Now I would use wood glue and glue them. And after you do that and you put your handle and rim together, and I want to make sure mine stays together, so I use a tiny, tiny nail. I will drill a hole, put that tiny nail through that hole, and then brad it on the other side. Then my Cannon County tie hides my nail. It takes so long to do the process of just getting your handle and rim ready, ribs ready, the Cannon County tie, weavers ready. But after you get all of those worked up, you can work on your ribs later in the winter, and you can also soak the weavers in rainwater, scrape them again, and then cut them. So it is a very long process. Miss Gertie taught me always to use rainwater. If you use water that has chlorine in it, it will make your wood darker, and you want your wood, your weavers, your handle and rim, you want the basket to be the color it was when you first started breaking down the pole and scraping all of it. So Miss Gertie taught me to use the rainwater. Rainwater is the only water I will use. We catch rainwater to make sure that I've got water for any time in the winter that I don't want to work on baskets. When I'm teaching a class, I take all the rainwater with me to make sure the students have rainwater, because Miss Gertie said rainwater was very, very important. We have talked about the ribs earlier, and let me tell you how important they are. These are the ribs, and they make the shape of your basket. And it depends on how long the rib is and how they're shaped, what shape of basket you have. The rib, when you start adding ribs, you have to scoot in above a rib that's already in there. So if it's sharpened, it will scoot right in and it will hold right there. So ribs, how they go in, see that one, it started making the shape on up. But the important thing was the rib was sharpened We had points. They scoot in beside the other ribs, and that makes the structure of the basket to where it's very sturdy, and when you get enough ribs in, you can weave some more. And here I've got some weavers tied together, but if I got ready to put them in the basket, I would put them in rainwater, and then I would start weaving with them. Also, you use some hardwood, and it's the darker, it comes from the middle of the tree, and that's how you get the Appalachian smile. Right here, this one is sort of light. Some of them are much, much darker. Here's my Appalachian smile. And it just so happened this tree had a really dark center part. It's harder to work with, but I do use it for trim. And always make an Appalachian smile. So depending on your tree, how dark that Appalachian smile might be. After you have the Appalachian smile in, you make about 3 or 4 rows in the basket. And then it's time for turnbacks. And because the basket has a bulge, you've got more room here than you do at the bottom or the very top. So when you're weaving, you go up part way, and you take the weaver and you circle a rib and push it up underneath the rib that's there. You never turn on this top rib or this bottom rib, or it'll leave a hole in your basket. And I can look on the inside and I can tell where I turned, and I'm going to have to do some more packing. It makes a little V on the inside, but on the outside, it's not that noticeable. But you do have to fill in, and you want to get all your turnbacks in as soon as you can. So what I do is measure from the handle to the handle, and I mark halfway. I mark halfway on the bottom and halfway on the other side. Then I'll run a tape measure through there, and I mark every rib the center. Well, as soon as I get all that marked, I will see how much distance that I know I've got between the weaving I have in there. And usually I'll have 2.5 inches on each side of my mark. Well, I go through and mark all of that. When I do that, it tells me what area I have to fill in with turnbacks. As soon as I get to that mark, I know it's straight weaving. And you want to finish your basket to where you've got straight weaving all the way. So it takes a long time to weave and to make sure you get all your turnbacks in before you even get to the process of putting your basket on together. It's really a filler. You can circle a rib, push underneath. Okay, let me just show you one here. Okay, I'm going to come up, and I've gone under that one. So I'm going to go back down in between the two, and I'm going to push it underneath that weaver there. Well, then when I come up, I'm going to come up to where it's over the next one. So really and truly, right there, you can't see I made a turn back. Well, if I'm filling in, I may have to do another one down here, but you always do it on a rib that you can push it underneath the weaver that's already there. And you're going to be doing that probably. You'll turn here, you'll turn down here on one that can go under. You come back up and go across the top. If you put too many turnbacks in one place, you're going to leave a hole, plus you will not have a place to be pushing them underneath that previous weaver. So you can only do that one time on this one. And then the next time you come up, you're going to have to go across the top and go through to where when you come back this way, you can turn back again on one that you can push it underneath. After we've marked, if we'll fill in that bulge, it will help us to make sure that we're going straight when we finish the basket. A refined basket, you want the middle to be straight. You want all your turnbacks on the side. Years ago, there was a few people that did turnbacks right down the middle. And that looked like a huge big V here. It was ugly. It wasn't refined. So when I do this, I don't have that big V down the middle. I think it was faster for them to do that because they were making a basket as fast as they could because they needed money to buy what necessities they had at the grocery store, or they would sell it to the broker. They would get, I heard Miss Gertie say she got 10 cents for some of her baskets when she was growing up. Things have changed. Now, basket making is an art. And Miss Gertie made the neatest baskets. And also, whenever Miss Gertie was telling me about a basket, Miss Mary Jane came with her all the time, but she had a different method, so whoever they chose to be their student, they stayed with that same one all the time because each one of them did different style turnback, and it was simpler for the student if they knew exactly how to do the turnback by the way their teacher had told them to. People will ask me how long it takes to make a basket. From the tree to a basket varies. For this basket, it would take probably a month because it takes so long to break down the tree, get all the materials ready, and then assemble a basket. But with Big Bertha, I worked on Big Bertha off and on for 6 years. Big Bertha's got tiny, tiny weavers. You can see the Hardwood smile. This one I treasure big time. And I have received 2 awards, which is wonderful. But Big Bertha is very, very special, and 6 years is a long time to try to get one basket made. But You cannot weave baskets every day. And I did get Big Bertha done at the end of 6 years. So this is a very special basket. I was also honored to receive the Governor's Award from the state of Tennessee. It is such an honor to have that award. Since I am the only teacher in Middle Tennessee that makes the Cannon County tie white oak basket, I want this to continue. And if you ever go to the Cannon County Arts Center, there's a basket display case there that features many, many people that made baskets, and they have them on display that you can go in and see them at any time. But if you look, that Cannon County tie is on every basket. It may vary a little, but it's still that same style. So I feel honored. I even have a basket in that display case. I think there's 3 people that have baskets in the case that are still living. And one time a year I go down and I set up a display, and it's from the tree to the basket. We have somebody there that's using the shaving horse. We have somebody there that's whittling, somebody there that's weaving, and then we show many, many baskets. And I take down pieces for the young people to handle, and they just cannot believe it come from a tree. They've never really seen or handled the wood before. So I take my scrap pieces down, and I don't mind for them to handle them. And we give them the history as much as we can. So white oak baskets, it's getting to where there's fewer white oak trees and fewer that do not have knots and limbs and blemishes on the trunk part of the tree. And all baskets come from the trunk of the tree. You cannot buy white oak cut, scraped in any store, and you cannot find anybody that will do all that work and sell you the supplies. It is a labor of love. You go to the woods, you cut your tree, you do the breakdown, you do all the setup. So, no, you can never, ever buy white oak from any type of store, any type. And so many people think, oh, well, Basket Maker's catalog. A lot of people order reed or other materials. Hey, you cannot order white oak. They will not even talk to you about white oak. The white oak basket is very rare because all of it is from the tree. You have to do it. It's got to be special to you to put that much work in a basket. And even when I teach classes, the students have to scrape, they have to whittle, they have to do all the things that I've talked about in order to get a white oak basket. I know I commented that one time Miss Gertie only got a dime for a basket. Well, I had a lady come in picking out how many baskets of mine she wanted to buy. And I said, you didn't ask price. It doesn't matter. So I priced them like I had sold some before. When you start paying $900 to $2,500 for a basket, you know they want a basket. She was thrilled to death, and she just about cleaned out my stock buying white oak baskets. She even looked at one I had and wanted that basket, and it was this one that I redid. And I told her she couldn't have it, but I would make her one. So I made her. She called it a market basket. Years ago, it was a garden basket. But she was going to use it as a market basket. She was thrilled to death to get it. So, it depends on if you're an artist, you want to buy stuff that an artist would make. So I was pleased that she bought so many, but then I had to make several just to have different ones to show when people came to look at my baskets. So all of it is very important, but you work so hard, most people will not sell a basket. And I have a couple of ladies that have been taking my class in Crossville for 20 plus years. Their big thing is they get away from home, they enjoy visiting with the rest of us, and they have a white oak basket. And it's very special to them. And it's special to me to think they want to keep coming back and talk to everybody else about their baskets, how nice they are, when they made them, how they made them. So it is very rewarding to teach classes and for students to continue to make baskets. The state of Tennessee, I was fortunate to get to be one of the first ones in their program, and they called me a master teacher for the apprentice program. I had 4 apprentices, and I was hoping one of the 4 apprentices I had would be teachers. So far, that hasn't happened. If they're with me, yes, they will teach. They'll do assistant teaching, but they will not go and teach on their own because there is so much work getting ready to make a basket. And they don't want to go to the woods. They don't want to do all that breakdown, all that scraping, some of the whittling. So it is almost a lost art. And I want to make sure that people still know that Cannon County baskets is very, very important. And Cannon County is the capital. Much more important to me than Warren County is the nursery capital. That just, so what? Anybody can grow nursery, but not many people can make a basket.